Welcome once again, my fellow manipulators of digital fate. I'm Richie, this is Capricorn, and today's deck, we're finally there. It is our first deck from Ixalan Early Access. That's the Lost Caverns of Ixalan, and I am super stoked to share it with you guys. Before we get to that really quick, I want to just make sure you guys know that we do have a playlist of spoiler shorts that I'm going to link up above and down below. So check that out if you want my take on different cards in this new Ixalan set as they were spoiled and what I think about them. Also, a big shout out to my patrons over at patreon.com/quarantinecapricorn. That's Yuck Fuzi, Squirrel, Noah Vincent, and Brittany at the Brew Crew Elite tier. And then, of course, our forever CPU savior, Terrence Rohrbach. Super appreciative of you guys for all of the support. This deck in particular is called Undying Anvil. Why? Because we're using Oni-Cult Anvil with all of the ridiculous new artifacts that have come out in the Lost Caverns of Ixalan set. And it's absolutely absurd. And the reason it's called Undying Anvil is because, if you remember, Anvil was supposed to rotate. If standard rotation stayed the way it was supposed to be, it would have rotated. But because it didn't, now we can mix Anvil with all of these new artifact shenanigans and do things that were never meant to exist in standard. And there's just a ton of interactions that are absolutely absurd and gross, and we're gonna nail all of them for sure. Before we break down the deck, I was almost gonna say meta, but I mean, maybe this is the new meta. I don't know. Before we break down the deck, make sure you like, subscribe, all that good stuff. It really does help the channel grow. If this video gets 100 likes, I will iterate on it and make a new version of this deck. There are a lot of one-ofs in this deck trying things out. They seem like they're right as one-ofs, but I could definitely see other versions of this deck being pretty wild. So like the video if you haven't yet already, and catch me live over on Twitch Monday through Friday. That's twitch.tv/quarantinecapricorn. Because if I'm alive and I'm breathing, I'm there and I'm streaming. Now let's check out this deck. Alright guys, so this deck is pretty darn spicy. Now, the idea here is we are brewing around Oni-Cult Anvil, which isn't anything new, but I did note the fact that Oni-Cult Anvil should have rotated if they didn't change the way standard rotation works. Because of that, I wanted to try and break Oni-Cult Anvil with all of the new crazy artifact shenanigans that have been coming in with Ixalan, and I think we got some pretty wild, some pretty crazy shit going on in this deck, and I think there are a lot of ways we can pseudo break, maybe not completely break the anvil, but definitely make it more powerful than it ever was before. So the core, man, there's so many one-ofs we tried. There's so much. You got to check out the gameplay. It's going to be nuts. But before we talk about that, let's just break down all these cards. Okay, so first of all, Akal, Pakal, First Among Equals. 1 blue and 2 for a 1/5 human advisor. This guy is nuts. At the beginning of each player's end step, if an artifact entered the battlefield under your control this turn, you look at the top 2 cards of your library, put one of them into your hand and the other into your graveyard. He's just crazy. We jammed 3 in here. Every time we activate the anvil, we get an artifact creature token onto the battlefield from the anvil, and that will trigger Akal Pakal at the end of turn to give us the best card from the top 2. But not only do we get the best card from the top 2, we get to put the other card in our graveyard, which helps us descend and turn on certain things in the deck that care about us descending, and we'll get back to that when we get to those cards. But Akal Pakal here just refills your hand every turn. If you can find a way to trigger him during your opponent's turn, you can get extra value off of him, but this deck plays with almost all artifacts, and it consistently can trigger Akal Pakal every single turn, which is just an insane amount of card advantage. Plus, he survives cut downs, he survives lightning strikes and all that, so he's hard to deal with for a 3-drop, and he just gives you insane value in this deck. We've also got 1 copy of the Enigma Jewel. Now, we're not using necessarily a ton of things that we want to steal the activated abilities of with this, but what we really are after is the fact that when we craft this into Locus of Enlightenment, it's going to allow us to trigger all of our activated abilities twice instead of once whenever we trigger one. So it comes into play as a 1-drop, comes in tapped, but as soon as it untaps, we're then able to use the 2 colorless mana to activate any abilities on the battlefield. We can use it to, you know, maybe crack some blood tokens to dig for stuff. There's a few other things we can do. We can use it with Mishra's Research Desk, which we'll get to later. But really, we want to use that 2 mana to pay for its own ability to craft it, which essentially makes that craft cost 7 instead of 9. And with enough other cards in this deck that can flip into lands under certain conditions, it's actually much easier getting to that 7 than you think it would be. But if we can craft this with 4 permanents from our graveyard, or even if we have to take 1 or 2 from play, this will flip into Locus of Enlightenment. Not only will it get all of those abilities, but it's going to make all of our abilities trigger twice, which means all of our Oni-Cult Anvils are now going to ping for 2. They're going to drain for 2. And it gets kind of absurd. The whole deck is pretty filled with activated abilities, so we get a lot of value off of this. But not only that, it's a way for, if our opponent deals with our Oni-Cult Anvil, and our Oni-Cult Anvil is sitting in the graveyard, it's a way for us to craft that Oni-Cult Anvil from the graveyard as part of crafting the Enigma Jewel, and essentially kind of get it back, because the Enigma Jewel will turn into the Locust, get the abilities of the Anvil. So if they've destroyed our Anvil, this is a good way to get it back from the graveyard in a way, and double the abilities, while also doubling the abilities of any future anvils, or any anvils that are out right now, and doubling all the other abilities from everything else in the deck. So it gets kind of nutty. There's a lot of new cards here, but we're going to start at the beginning of the curve for the rest of them. 4 Mishra's Research Desk, 4 Experimental Synthesizers. These are artifacts. They trigger our artifact synergies, and they help us to dig deeper into more cards, and each of them can be used twice. We've also got 4 Voldaren Epicure. This is a key card because it itself is a permanent. It will count towards Descend when it dies, but it also creates an artifact token for us on turn 1, which is pretty key if we want to jam a turn 2 Anvil and start using it immediately. Then on our 2-drop slot, we've got the obvious 4 Bloodtithe Harvester. Similar reasons to the Epicure, except we also have the added ability of using this as creature removal if we need to. So having our creature removal be in the form of permanents that will contribute to our Descend if we need it is super, super important. Bloodtithe Harvester is perfect here. We've also got 1 Sir Ginger because we're sacking artifacts left and right. This guy can get super huge and win games all on his own. But we're trying to jam so much into this deck, I don't mind just having 1 since it's legendary. Speaking of legendary, we have 1 copy of Saheeli the Sun's Brilliance. This is kind of like the backside of Fable of the Mirror Breaker, the reflection of Kiki-Jiki, without the extra chapters, in a way. This is a 2/2 for 2 mana. You can pay 2, tap it, make a token that's a copy of an artifact or creature, becomes an artifact if it isn't already, gains haste, and you have to sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. So this is a way for us to make even more temporary copies of our Oni-Cult Anvil that can sack themselves if they need to, since they're going to go away at end of turn anyway, and just get multiple triggers off of those anvils because of it. But we can also make copies of a lot of other things, and put this to a ton of good use in here, especially since the copy becomes an artifact. It's going to trigger all of our artifact synergies. And this card can just do so much. Again, it's just legendary. It's still a legendary, so we're just going to jam 1 here because we are trying to fit as many of these cards. There's just so many good cards for the archetype, and we're trying to work with as many as we can. So just 1 copy here because it's legendary. We've also got 1 Dowsing Device. I was just testing this, and maybe there should be more. I'm not entirely sure, but I think at least the 1 copy is pretty good. It comes down... It gives your Anvil tokens +1/+0 and haste that turn. So if it's a new token that you just made with the Anvil, it can swing in for an extra point of damage as well. And then it almost always immediately flips because it flips as soon as you have 4 or more artifacts, and it becomes the Geode Grotto. This is important because it'll give us extra mana to ramp into and play more things, even if we don't use the ability. But then the ability itself, we can pay 3 and tap it, give any creature +X/+0, where X is the number of artifacts we control. So let's turn any of our little token creatures or epicures or whatever into huge like 7/1s or 8/1s pretty easily, especially when we run out of gas in our hand. We're just able to start jamming this every turn, forcing them to have to trade with one of our tokens in order to not just get smashed in the face for a bunch of damage. And at least the 1 copy I think is definitely worth including. Might be worth exploring more. We've also got 4 Tithing Blades. Because what's better than an Edict that's the same cost as an Edict than an Edict that's the same cost as an Edict but is also an artifact that just sits there and lets you do artifact things. When you play it and make them sacrifice their creature, it will also trigger your Akal Pakal. It will also just be there to sacrifice to Oni-Cult Anvil. It's a permanent, so if it goes to the graveyard, it's going to count as descending. Just so much value we can get out of the Tithing Blade by having it be essentially a removal spell and then just be resources for us afterwards. Speaking of which, we have 2 Tarrian's Journal. This is a legendary artifact for 2 mana. At first I was going to jam just 1 copy because it's legendary, but then I realized there is kind of a way to make 2 work. So you can tap this thing and sack an artifact or creature to draw a card. You don't have to pay any mana. You can only activate it as a sorcery, but no mana. So a lot of times, even if we have our Oni-Cult Anvils out, the first time we sack something to trigger our anvils, we'd much rather draw a card than, just drain for 1. So being able to draw a card off of this for no mana and just sacking the things we're going to want to sack anyway is pretty good. Going back to Tithing Blade, that's another thing we can sacrifice the Tithing Blade after it's done its thing. So that's super good. But we can also get double activations of Tarrian's Journal when we have Enigma Jewel flipped into Locus of Enlightenment. So if we sacrifice 1 artifact or creature, it will trigger twice and we'll draw 2 cards, which is nuts. And then we can pay 2, tap, and discard our hand to transform it into Tomb of Aclazotz. This is pretty easy to do when we're out of gas, and there's also a workaround where we can actually have 1 on the field and still play 1, where what we can do here is, if we have a Tarrian's Journal on the field, we can play a second one, and then while the second one is on the stack, before it resolves, we tap 2 mana and the Tarrian's Journal and activate the transform in response. And then that Tarrian's Journal that's already down will transform into the tomb, and then the one that's still waiting to resolve will resolve and come into play as a Tarrian's Journal. That way you'll get to keep the tomb and the Tarrian's Journal, because otherwise, if you didn't do it that way, you have to discard your hand to transform this. So if you have a second Tarrian's Journal in your hand, it would just get discarded. So that's a way to get around it. Put it on the stack, respond by transforming the one that's in play, and then let the one that's on the stack resolve. And then you get Tomb of Aclazotz. This can tap for black mana, help us ramp, just like some of the other cards we've already talked about, help us get to that key 7 we need for the Enigma Jewel to flip it. But also, it allows us to just tap it and cast any creature spell from our graveyard, although it does come in with a finality counter. But that's really good gravy for if we just have Bloodtithe Harvesters, Epicures, a Saheeli, a Sir Ginger, or maybe our Akal Pakal got dealt with earlier in the game. Being able to start replaying those cards every turn is just even more value. So there's just so much stuff in this deck that's just jamming value on top of value on top of value, and it gets kind of absurd. We've got a couple more 1-drops in the 3-drop slot. 1 Brass's Tunnel Grinder. When it comes into play, even if you discard nothing, you still get to draw 1 card. And then it's an artifact that can do artifact things. But you can also discard any number of cards, draw a card for each one that gets discarded, which will help you fill up your Descend. And then if at your end step, if you descend, you'll put a boar counter on this, and then once it has 3 or more boar counters, you remove them and transform it. So this is one of the reasons why we're paying attention to wanting to descend, and most of the things in this deck are permanents, which is why it's so key to have like Tithing Blade be a removal spell but also count as a permanent, things like that. They really help fuel this descend. But if we can get this flipped into Tecutlan the Searing Rift, then every single permanent we play, which most of the cards in this deck are permanents, is going to discover X, where X is that spell's mana value. Now, most of our cards are pretty cheap, so it's not like we're discovering for a lot, but if the first thing that we play every turn gets to grab something for free off of our deck, that's just insane value that gets insane, even if we don't have anything super big to cast with it. So that could just be really nuts. And also just getting access to more land to be able to ramp our mana base is also really good here. And then we've also got the Everflowing Well for similar reasons. It enters the battlefield, we mill 2 cards and then draw 2 cards for 3 mana. So it's draw 2 for 3 mana, but it also is an artifact to use with our artifact shenanigans, and it mills us 2, and that's going to help with our Descend. If we hit Descend 8, which this is another card that cares about Descend, we're able to flip this into the Myriad Pools, which can tap for blue, and if we use that blue to cast a permanent spell, we can have target permanent that's in play become a copy of that spell until end of turn. So it's a way to get extra copies of some of our ridiculous spells that we're playing. It's also a way to ramp. It's just sheer value, and it's worth trying out the one of for sure. And then moving on to our 4-drop slot, we've got just one playset of Terrortide. Those are the only 4-drops. This is 2 black and 2 for a sorcery. Has Fathomless Descent. This card is the #1 reason we're worried about Descent in this deck. All creatures get -X until end of turn, where X is the number of permanent cards in your graveyard. I was looking at this card during spoiler season and trying to figure out where it fits the best. And I think in a deck like this, where almost everything is permanents and we're going to be able to fill up that Fathomless Descent pretty easily, pretty quickly, but also be in a position where we can wipe the board and recover from it really well because of our anvils, being able to sack artifacts after the board wipe and start rebuilding our board right away, and really just get ahead of our opponent. It works really well. Also, because Pakal has such a high toughness of 5, a lot of times we can very carefully get our graveyard to the point where it has 3 or 4 permanents in it and sweep the board but keep our Pakal and then trigger our anvils after the sweep, and it gets just kind of crazy. So I think Terrortide is a really great inclusion here. If we look at the mana base, we've got 3 Mycosynth Gardens. I would like 4, but because we're in 3 colors, it's kind of hard to come down on the dual lands any more than we already have. So I think we gotta stick to 3 gardens and 1 Mirrex to make artifact fodder for our sacrifice shenanigans. And then we've got 4 Xander's Lounge, 1 Sulfurous Springs, 1 Restless Vents, 4 Blackcleave Cliffs, 1 Stormcarved Coast, 1 Shivan Reef, 1 Restless Spire, 1 Underground River, 1 Shipwreck Marsh, and 2 Darkslick Shores. And this gets us just the right amount of each color that I think we need. We've got a little less blue, and we can wait a little longer to use the blue, and it kind of works out pretty much perfectly. I'd like to have more Mycosynth Gardens in a perfect world, but it's really hard to fit a full playset of 4 in a deck that's trying to consistently use 3 colors. And in the case of Bloodtithe Harvester, you really need to double down on making sure you have black and red on turn 2. It's also worth noting that one of these lands is a new card, Restless Vents. It's one of the new man lands. Taps for black or red, or you can pay 3 to turn it into a 2/3 insect until end of turn with Menace. And when it swings, you get to discard a card and draw a card. Just a little bit of extra value for late in the game if you're running out of gas. It also lets us discard and draw, which digs to something we need for an answer while filling up our graveyard for Descend. So I think it works pretty well. The games have been kind of bananas. We got 3 pretty insane wins with this, and I definitely think we're just looking at the tip of the iceberg when it comes to ways we can utilize Oni-Cult Anvil with this new set. So I'm definitely interested in iterating on this and maybe testing out some more of these one-ofs. Maybe some of them should be more than just one-of, and really seeing what we can brew in the future. So if this video gets to 100 likes, I will make a new version of this deck and put it up. So smash that like button. With all that out of the way, let's check out the games. We'll keep this. Let's try it out. Probably start with a Spire, even though I'd really... you know what? I think it's more important to get the Epicure down, actually. That way we can activate the Oni-Cult Anvil on turn 2 when we play it. Alright, Darkslick Shores. We'll go Anvil. Swing. And then we'll crack the blood token. Good old Terrortide. Shannibal VIP. What you got for me, Shannibal? Intrepid Paleontologist. We'll discard the Blackcleave Cliffs, because that gets Terror Tide up to -1/-1. Pass a turn. We'll just set up our wall of Anvil. We've got Brass's Tunnel Grinder coming next turn. And that one's going to be pretty wild, I think. Glimpse the Core. Grabbing a forest. This looks like dinosaur ramp of some sort. Alright. We are going to Brass's Tunnel Grinder. We're only going to keep one Terror Tide. We'll get rid of the Epicure too, because it puts a permanent in our graveyard for the other Terror Tide. We will be putting a boar counter on, which is nice. We're going to swing with everything. Maybe we'll hold on to the Epicure. We might need the Epicures to help us descend for Brass's Tunnel Grinder on other turns. We've already descended this turn because we put an Epicure in the graveyard from our hand. So we're going to just swing with the 2 1/1s. And then whichever one he blocks, we're just going to sack. Because we get one to replace it anyway. So that will basically hit him for 2 now. The Tunnel Grinder will get a boar counter. Alright, he's got 5 mana. Thrawn Portal came down tapped, which is kind of a bummer for him. It's Quinth. Alright, so he kills... what? That's fine. Dowsing Device, huh? +1/+0 and haste. Alright, it flipped. Trying to think how I want to do this. We'll go Bloodtithe Harvester. And then we'll swing. With just that guy. We'll see if he blocks. It's not going to block. Alright, we need to descend this turn. So since he didn't block the Epicure and it didn't die, we're going to crack the blood token. Discard the synthesizer. So that we can descend. And then we're going to end the turn. Alright, Brass's Tunnel Grinder has a second counter on it now. Let's see, we have 4 artifacts in play, so this will give +4/+0 and haste if we want to use it. I don't think we're quite there yet, though. If we Terror Tide, we're going -3/-3. Trumpeting Carnosaur. Discovering 5. Grabs a Huatli. Sure. I almost kind of wish we were playing with proliferate spells for Brass's Tunnel Grinder. But there's only one in this deck, so probably wouldn't be right for the build. Alright. We are going to play the Oni-Cult Anvil. We're going to play the Synthesizer. See what we can hit. A land. We'll play the land. We will sack the Synthesizer to make sure that we descend this turn. That will trigger both anvils, and we'll see if we can get something else we can play. No dice, and we can't cycle it. That's kind of a bummer. We could swing with Restless Spire, but that Carnosaur is a problem. So, we're just going to pass the turn and flip the Brass's Tunnel Grinder. I mean, also being able to ramp up our lands with Dowsing Device and Brass's Tunnel Grinder is pretty sick as well, right? Like, even if we don't use them for their abilities. Polani's Hatcher. Pass to combat. Let's see, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 permanents in the yard. So if we get 2 more permanents in the yard, we can actually wipe the board next turn. Which I think we want to do, honestly, before he can flip the Huatli. Hello. Alright, we're going to pass the blockers. We're going to put one boy here. And then we're going to go like that. Just to prevent as much of the trample damage as possible, really. And make sure we get to keep one artifact to trigger the anvils. Alright. My turn. Now we've got Terror Tide. -7, -7. Let's go. Trigger both anvils. Get our boys. We'll play Mishra's Research Desk off of Tekutlon. Get an Enigma Jewel. Because why not? Because why not? Let's crack it. We could save it for next turn, but let's crack it. Ooh, that's a difficult decision. I think Akal Pakal. End the turn. Akal Pakal is really good. It's really good. Alright, we can craft with artifact. Oh, we can craft with any non-lands. So we can get the Bloodtithe Harvester ability, which we don't really want. We could get the Synthesizer ability. We'll see. 8, 9 mana. We have 9 mana. I don't know what will be better. Let's start by doing Akal, Pakal, so that we can also grab a Tithing Blade. Oh my god. This is so powerful. This is so stupid powerful. I don't even know what to do, guys. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We can't activate the Enigma Jewel. We could go like this. Oh my god. This is so ridiculous. He has to block it. And then we get 2 more tokens. And then artifacts entered. So we end the turn, and we get to grab something off the top. I guess we'll go Tithing Blade again. Synthesizer goes in the yard, which helps if we get another Terror Tide. Good lord. Good lord. Akal, Pakal. We didn't even rock the Enigma Jewel yet, man. We could have. We could have made it so that all of our Oni-Cult Anvils get double triggers. Grixis. It's got trample, right? We'll just let it through. Is what it is. I mean, I'm pretty sure we still win no matter what, so. Alright, my turn. We're gonna play a Mycosynth. We're gonna pay 2. We're gonna copy you. Tap the Enigma Jewel to do it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So crazy, dude. Alright, we're gonna Tithing Blade and discover X. Grab a research desk. Make him sack one of his guys. We'll go Geode Grotto. And we'll swing with our 11-1. Dude, these lands are nuts. Brass's Tunnel Grinder and Dowsing Device are like... oh my god. And then we'll crack this. Trigger all 3 Oni-Cult Anvils. Get a Synthesizer to play next turn. And end the turn. And then we get to grab, I guess, a Mishra's Research Desk. Akal Pakal just going nuts over here. Just going completely nuts. Nah, it'll be fine. We can sack some guys to the anvil to gain life. If we have to. We can drain for 6 next turn, 2 this turn and 6 next turn, even without swinging. We just turn on the Enigma Jewel, and then we're good. Hello. Exiling a dinosaur. Don't think you can play it though. You don't have enough mana left, right? He's only got 4. He's not going to be able to do the discard. Let's see what he's got. No blocks. No blocks. We're fine. Go ahead and put all of the dinosaurs out. We're gonna kill you. Unless you have some way of gaining a bunch of life. If he can gain a bunch of life, he might be able to hold on, but I don't think he's got really anything that can do that in a dinosaur deck. Sack 1. Now, if I wanted to, I could sack my own anvil and then just craft it with the Enigma Jewel, and that would let me descend this turn. But I don't think it's worth it. There's nothing we really need to descend on his turn for. If we still had the Tunnel Grinder out, descending on his turn would be helpful. Alright. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So we have enough to flip the Enigma Jewel. But that's all we can do. But that's probably fine. We'll play the Restless Vents. We will craft. Harvester. Synthesizer. Synthesizer, I guess. We don't really need the extra abilities. We just need to get the double triggers from the anvils to close out the game. Good lord. So yeah, now we just go like this. And we get double triggers. We'll sacrifice a Tithing Blade too. And there we go. Our first win. Locus of Enlightenment, man. Whew. Ah, MTG Joe. Alright, we'll keep this. This looks fine. We will start with a Shipwreck Marsh. We'll go Cliffs. We'll go Harvester. See what we got here. Dinosaur. Dino-saucers. Belligerent Yearling. I think I just want to do... let's just do this. And then let's do this. And then let's do this. That seems fine to me. Scythe Claw Raptor. Well, I think we just gotta do this, right? Tithing Blade. Let's sack the Tithing Blade. Because why not? Some more cards in our yard for Terror Tide. Seems fine. Alright. We've got another boy. Here's what we do. We play you. And then Dowsing Device transforms. And then we activate our gardens with the extra mana to make another anvil. And then we swing with the 2/1. And then we sack that one to make 2 more. That seems fine. That seems fair, right? Seems fine and fair and fine. Alright, Mr. Dinosaur. Come at me. He's gonna play the Trumpeting Carnosaur. He's gonna discover 5. He's gonna hit a Scythe Claw Raptor. Well then. We have 2 cards in the yard. We are gonna need a lot more in the yard to kill that Carnosaur. Yes, 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 we are. We're gonna start with this. Then we're gonna go like this. Go ahead and sack something. Then we're gonna do a little bit of this. Sure, we'll take the Everflowing Well. And then we'll swing with 3 boys. And whichever one he blocks, we'll sack to the anvil. Put another counter on Sir Ginger. Scry again, even though we don't really need to. Alright, you're at 10. We're at 25. Let's see what you got. Mr. Carnosaur. Bonehead Dracosaur. We'll let it through. We have plenty of life. Now we really need to Terror Tide, right? We could just sack all of our artifacts. We wouldn't have anvils anymore, but we'd be able to wipe the board if we did. Maybe it doesn't even matter. We could just set up for next turn by using the Everflowing Well. Let's just do that. Mill 2, draw 2. Brass's Tunnel Grinder would be sick. Does this have first strike? It does have first strike. That is wild. Could you imagine? It's in the air too. Let's just dump the Brass's Tunnel Grinder. As good as it is, we're not going to have time to get it onto the field. Whenever an artifact you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield. We're just going to get wild. We're just going to get absolutely wild. Get out of here, land. And then we'll go... Wait, not you. One of you. So we get through the first strike. And still hit him for 3. Alright. What do you got for me? We're up to 20. We have got 2 blockers for the non-tramplers. So we should be okay. Alright, we got it. I think this is okay. It's super weird. We're gonna try and keep it. Alright, here comes Maloney. The Maloney Boney. Baloney. Baloney. Maloney. Pass turn. We've got a Gallagreeters. Alright, we're gonna crack this sucker. We're gonna discard. Yeah, we'll discard Terratide. Who cares? It's whatever. Tithing Blade. We'll swing one. We gotta get Akal Pakal. Or Akal Pakal. We gotta get him down. Swing. Virtue of Loyalty. Sure. That just helps us descend. Which isn't necessarily a bad thing. End the turn. Trigger Akal Pakal. We'll take a Mycosynth Gardens. Alright, now we've got 2 permanents in the yard. We got a Jetmir in play. Terratide. Oh, we're definitely not going to Terratide yet. Can we copy something and have it be relevant? No. No, we can't. End the turn. We'll grab, I guess, an Everflowing Well. Put another card in the yard. We're up to 3 for our Terrortide. We want it to stick at 4, specifically, because that will kill Jetmir and probably anything else he plays. But leave our Akal Pakal alive. Oh, shit. He sees it coming. Okay, okay. We will block. We will put you in the yard, thank you very much. Let's see. We don't have the extra mana for Terrortide because Enigma Jewel can only be used for abilities. But we are getting there. We should be able to next turn. And this turn we can just Tithing Blade. Look at all them Tithing Blades. Past turn. Finally get our Anvil. Alright, next turn's gonna be fucking wild. Wild. Another Jetmir. Another Jetmir. Okay, we're gonna start with the Synthesizer. Grab a land. Play the Anvil. Copy the Anvil. Play the Journal. Use the Journal to sacrifice. I mean, I guess it doesn't really matter, right? We'll sack one of you. Oh god. No attacks. End the turn. This is looking kinda gnarly. Alright, we've got 8 in the yard, which means Everflowing Well is gonna flip. Which means we can turn a permanent in play into a copy of Anvil when we play it. We've got 8 potential mana for flipping the Enigma Jewel, so we do need one more for that. We'll block Jetmir. Alright, my turn. We've got another land now. Dude, there's just so much we could do. Let's get this out of the way. Let's get this out of the way. 1, 2. 3, 4. We could sacrifice this for stuff if we really wanted to, but we are not going to do that right now. We're going to swing with this guy. Then we are going to sack him to this guy. Draw a card. We get to draw 2. And then we will end the turn. And then we'll grab a Bloodtithe Harvester with Akal Pakal. Akal Pakal. Cutzil. Malamet Exemplar. Draw a card. That's fine. None of these guys have trample, right? We'll just do that. And then we will sack one. It will trigger twice because of Locus of Enlightenment. I think we're going to save the other boy, though. Nah, you know what? I think we just start jamming, man. I think we just start jamming. Brass's Tunnel Grinder now. Oh, God. Alright, well. First, we're going to do this. Oh, we didn't get to use the blue for it. Shit. That's okay. We'll do this. This, I guess. We'll keep this one so that we can use it. And then we'll make another one. We'll make a lot. Make a lot of those. Then we'll go this. We'll do that. And we'll do all that. Whatever that is. Then we'll play you. And then we'll go like you. And then we'll do you. Next to combat. No attacks. I guess we'll go like this. Because we can. And then we'll end the turn. Grab another anvil. Oh god. You're at 5. Do have a lot of beef though. Alright, now they've all got trample. Now they've all got trample. So that's 12, 13, 14. Which is probably fine. Alright, you're drawing cards, but you need life. We can do 10 damage direct to the face with our anvils before you get to untap. Oh, he scooped. He took our fun away. Oh, man. What a time to be alive. Thanks so much for checking out my channel. I'd like to give a huge shout out to all of my patrons over at Patreon. Without you guys, this channel would not be possible, so honestly, thank you from the bottom of my heart for all of your contributions. If you haven't yet, like and subscribe. The more likes we get and the quicker we get them, the bigger this channel will grow and the faster it will grow. I'd love nothing more than this channel to become something very special for you guys, but it's entirely up to you how fast that happens. Also, if you'd like more deck text, that's somewhere over there. And if you'd like to see what else the channel's been up to lately, that's somewhere up that way. Also, subscribe, circle below, do all the things.